Vijay, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you making the time today.
Hey, Todd. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So maybe we'll start with a little bit about your background. What do you do today? And then how did you get there?
Thanks. Vijay Rajendran, based in the San Francisco Bay Area. What I do today is I'm an executive coach, author, and also venture builder
Okay.
here in the Bay Area. And how I got here is really a 25-year story in is really a 25-year story of being an entrepreneur or someone who's just found themselves time and time again of service to entrepreneurial leaders.
Okay.
And what that consists of is, sort of catching the startup bug when I was in college in the late 90s, and then doing things in and out of different entrepreneurial communities. That includes working in microfinance in West Africa. It includes starting a gourmet e-commerce company after I moved to San Francisco, and also building companies in fintech and launching a venture studio inside of a major global bank. One of the things that I think was also career defining was working in venture capital for 5 years. And so I got to sit on the other side of the table, but in a way that really focused on building accelerators and incubators around the world with 500 Global. So working with the likes of GM and Siemens and LG and Visa and others. And then finally building out a portfolio development and portfolio value capability that was around fundraising, capital, customer connections, community, and things like that. And so part of my story has really been, how do I set up others to win in what I think is this great calling of entrepreneurship and founding startups.
So what do you think the theme is? Like, is it just a love of kind of maximizing talent and people that want to do this? Is it an attraction to kind of the drive and entrepreneurship that you kind of like around, everything? It seems like those are the types of people you want to surround yourself with. Is there any theme there that has kind of run through all of those experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's this real fun aspect of the idea of how you maximize relationships and build upon creative ideas. And what I often say is that startups are experiments on the future. It is ways in which we get to prototype new ways of living, working, doing business with others, and creating something that has to be useful for another person in order for one to extract any value for yourself. And so that I think is really important. And then why I spend so much of my time and effort on coaching and developing leaders is because over time we have gotten to this place where capital is more and more available over time, certainly, and then technology is more and more diffuse. And so what seems like it's a really scarce but powerful force multiplier is leadership. And that's where I want to invest the scarcest thing I have, which is my time, to help develop that.
That's an interesting one, and I 100%. I think I had a pretty good career with a company called Concur Technologies. We went from 7 million to like 1.2 billion. And the things that I remember the most is the investment in people, seeing them take on more responsibilities, get promoted. Investment in capital, personal capital it's rewarding, it's challenging, but I think like that's what helps a lot of companies scale too, right? You're building leaders for tomorrow, and so maybe we start there. Like I have a kind of a very simplistic model of entrepreneurs. We work with a lot of ones that go from 0 to 1, and then they're trying to scale. And so, at the beginning, as a leader, you're basically kind of the evangelist, and then you're doing it all, right? Because you're trying to convince other people to come with you, and then you have to be a high degree of execution and then communication, right? You have to be an evangelist of what you're doing. Then you kind of move into this territory that I think is like, if you're smart, you start to delegate, you start to tell people what to go do so you can create some scale for yourself. And then you go into empowerment, and then you start to really mentor and grow leaders for tomorrow. And so you see a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck at various stages, and I'm sure you see this in kind of your executive coaching. Maybe talk to me a little bit about maybe how your model's different, how you see these inflection points, and how like basically you almost have to reinvent some of the things you're doing annually to continue to stay up with the challenges that your company has and what you're really being asked to do to be a successful leader.
Yeah, I think that's such a good insight, Todd, that at the beginning, you have to wear all the hats. You have to do everything. And I've certainly experienced that myself. And then I see it
Sure.
in a lot of the leaders that I work with. And I really see it as like three stages. When you start your company and it's maybe you and a co-founder, or maybe it's just you, right? You are the chief everything officer. You call yourself the
Exactly.
CEO, but the E stands for everything. And then you imagine something, I'm the CEO of this like big company, right? The interstitial stuff, the in between, is very, very fuzzy. And so I think there's no one like moment where everything just kind of changes, like you flip a switch and you get there. But I think the in between is where you go from chief everything officer to chief enablement officer. So you
Mhm.
learn how to make other people as good or better than you in
Yep.
many of the areas in which they need to specialize, and you need to be operationally excellent in order to achieve a mission, in order to do whatever it is that's most important that day, that quarter, that year. And then after that, you get to this like chief executive officer state. And we all spend time on social media seeing these like heroes of among founders, and so the Jensens, the Brian Chesky's, the nuggets of wisdom from Bezos or Buffett or
Right.
whoever, right? And those people are explaining sometimes how they're running their lives, their world, their companies at that like end state. And how you get there just seems really hard, but it comes down to not just like delegation, but like this art and approach to how do I set up other people to win along the way, and that is enablement, because that's where the capabilities and success of your business comes in.
Yeah, and I think maybe to put a finer point to some of this is you have to kind of read the field a little bit, and to use a sports analogy, you're almost like a shortstop in a lot of this, where you're trying to figure out where the gaps in your teams are too, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like you maybe can do a lot of things, and in startups you don't need to do everything perfect, right? It's kind of an 80-20 rule for a lot of it, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
And so you have to evaluate the talent you have, where they can actually take responsibility away from you, and then where they've got some holes that you maybe have to continue to fill. And maybe because you don't have a lot of money, or because you don't have a brand name, the talent that you get may not be as good as you want to start with too. And so figuring that out and figuring out the holes, I think it takes a fair amount of self-awareness and kind of introspection to like understand what their role is at any point in time. And I think sometimes that's very difficult.
Yeah, there are a couple of different schools of thought about how you build out your team, right? So there are people who say, you get someone who's done this someplace else,
Yeah.
maybe one step ahead of where your company is now, so they kind of know what good looks like and how to get you there. Those people are very hard to recruit and very expensive to recruit. So the other school of thought is, I think Sam Altman talks about like you hire um, for slope, not y-intercept in a company, right? So like, what is
Yeah.
someone's potential, which is very hard to assess
Identify.
if you've never done that work before, right?
Yeah.
Because like in in his book on management, like Andy Grove says, like to be a manager of someone, you must understand their work and know how to do it. Again, that might be true in Intel. That's probably not true
No.
in your startup. So this is where I think between these like different schools of thought and different expectations of what great management and hiring looks like, a lot of founders come to me like super confused in terms of like, I don't know what we can get. I don't know how to calibrate and hire for the right person. And so one of the tools I found is really effective is to understand like what is the particular type of genius that someone needs at in a particular role. Like it might be that their ability to plan and organize is really important, or just like knock things out and get things done. You might like hit it off with them because in the interview or in some meeting, they're coming up with a bunch of ideas and you're really enjoying coming up with a bunch of ideas and you're brainstorming, but then, it turns out like the particular like superpowers for the role, even though they're really different from yours and, are not what that person is demonstrating or you're learning about them. So I think that is like the perhaps underappreciated thing amongst all the different like models you could use, because again, going back to the sound bites out there and the difference between the real world, like a lot of people will say like, oh yeah, I saw the Steve Jobs quote like, oh, A players hire A players, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I can't afford A players, so what do I do?
Right.
It's like, well, you got to find these non-obvious like A players then who but have superpowers that they and that you see and they know, but the world hasn't caught on to yet.
So this is kind of interesting. I guess I look back at my time at Concur, and it's like, I was definitely a business generalist. I started off as an engineer
Yeah.
in development, but over time, basically, I built a toolkit of I was pretty good with people. I had some business acumen. I was good with process. I wasn't willing to tear. I was pretty good with talent, recruiting talent, and basically, you were able to kind of go all the way from product management to GM to some sales to account management to whatever, because a lot of the core stuff was the same. And
Mhm.
that scaled me quite a ways. But I think one of the things that Concur did that you try to find, at least in some of the startups, and I think this is a cultural issue, and I'm curious on your opinion, is the executive staff did a pretty good job of making the deliverables pretty black and white. And so your job as a vice president, senior vice president, whatever it will happen to be for your division, was translate that into work and then hire people that can actually execute work on a consistent basis. And so we basically had that as kind of a culture. And if the direction was right, you basically continued to get better and better. And so it didn't mean that you didn't have strategic thought. And the business got more and more complex as you added more products, and that didn't get as clean. But I think early on, if you can build a kind of company culture that way, where it's very clean from an executive standpoint about what success looks like, and you hire people that can actually do good execution, then your chances of being successful and continuing to live another day seem to go up, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a lot there about what good leadership requires, and it requires communicating your intent very clearly, and it also includes having very clear either OKRs or KPIs or something. So in that case where people are going out to do a thing, they know what they're doing and why it matters. It should not be ambiguous in terms
Right.
of like
Yeah.
what success will be. And too often, companies that have a like, oh, we're going to do everything kind of approach, or we're trying to like hit a lot of things, have teams with very different incentives working against each other.
Yeah.
And so that made me do less things. Like concentrate the decision making and strategy in like one person, the CEO, not in like a bunch of different departments who want to do more of their thing, which is then
Right.
all you get is more.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where part of what I work with leaders on, and which I call startup system around fundraising, go to market, and also people is like what are the KPIs and metrics you need to hit so you can like reinvest in those three things every 18 months to like keep growing really robustly. I guess the missing factor is usually people in often larger companies, but sometimes in startups, they don't quite know what is it that we do and how will we know if we've been successful. Like sometimes it is, oh, we're just going to raise we're going to raise another round, or we're going to release another product, or right, there are these these symbols of success. But if it is something else, if it is your goal is to like have happy customers, we want to, and if we have a high NPS, that means we have low churn, we have like referral based growth, we have like right like if it's just this one metric that everybody in the company needs to understand, I might do HR, I might be in sales, I might be a sales engineer. It doesn't matter. what I know I'm doing is like creating like fanatic customers, right? And you don't have to be a person who owns a P&L or a product manager or someone like that to do that. You just need to be somebody who sees the connection between your work and what the business needs to do and what success can be.
I think that's a good one. I mean, we had this problem in spades. We had a pretty bad. We had a product that we replatformed. Our NPS was -11. So you're getting some attrition from a customer standpoint. Obviously, they're not buying more. They're pretty dissatisfied. And executive management basically said that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to basically comp every person is tied to increasing the NPS, and that doesn't matter if you're in accounting. It doesn't matter if you're in shipping, your facilities, or you're working with account management. And it was a unifying thing. And you can't have 5 of these, right? You can have 1 or 2
Yeah.
of these, or 3 maybe. But like you have to have that focus. And basically we were able to get that back in up the high 50s, and crisis averted. But it is a unifying idea that basically everybody gets behind, and they all play their role, right? Which is great. So let's pivot a little bit. You wrote a book that's been published, Beyond the Pitch Deck. And so this is talking a little bit about kind of fundraising. So maybe talk a little bit about the impetus of the book, and then maybe an overview of kind of what it covers.
Yeah. So here, I have a copy here. This is the funding framework.
Funding. There you go.
So the funding framework really takes my experience, not just personally as a founder or personally as an investor, but also sitting alongside many founders as they were trying to raise money over time for their startups while I was at 500. And in my current work, like I found just the need to repeat the same like message again and again, and to help people go from fundraising as a perception of some people are just good at it, or they have the right networks, or there's some serendipity that led to their success, when in fact there are systems and preparation that get you there. And there are these like 4 steps that are important along the way. And those are the 4 components of the framework: storytelling, organization, outreach, and closing with confidence.
So maybe is it worth doing a quick overview in each one of them, or or maybe just because I think it's interesting, and I think like everybody that we work with obviously wants to raise money and continue their journey, and so I think this is really relevant.
Yeah. So starting off, a lot of people should not be raising venture capital. Your best term sheet you're ever going to get is a purchase order, right? Let your customers like provide you with the capital to grow your business. And that traction and being customer obsessed is why you hopefully got into business, and the thing that good investors will recognize as a hallmark. Similarly, there are plenty of people I talk to who are doing things in deep tech or in other fields where there are grants. There's plenty of non-dilutive funding. So while I'm about to launch into explaining that why venture capital is attainable and good, it should not necessarily be the first choice for everybody. So that disclaimer out of the way. The first part about storytelling is recognizing that the best narrative wins. That when you meet with a VC or even an angel who's potentially meeting and seeing many founders in a week, your goal is not to get everything off your chest and to like share as much information as possible. Your goal is to be memorable. Because you want a callback. You want them to say, wow, you know what? I need to hear again from Todd. I need Todd to come in and meet our partners on Monday, or whatever it is, right? And how we as humans remember things is stories. So we've all been trained to go through this rubric of problem, solution, market, team, yada, 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 right? And here's my ask. And that is a good way to structure ideas. It turns out it doesn't help others always learn and understand. What they do learn, understand, and remember is the stories you tell within any of those particular components, or even better, where you launch in to explain how your product or solution is something that is really important to a customer. Oh, and by the way, they could never do this before. and now their world has changed, right? So the story in 3 acts of the situation, your business basically as the catalyst or agent for change that makes things like better in their lives, and how now they can never live without you, and telling the story of a real customer or of a situation that perhaps that investor themselves, particularly if they're an angel investor, can relate to and see themselves, is super important. And we can talk more about that, but that in a nutshell is why storytelling matters so much.
Is it? I mean, it sounds like a lot like Stories That Stick. I don't know if you read that book, but basically that's the sandwich kind of technique about, basically it's the before, it's the transition, it's the after, right? Like, what does this problem really look like from a storytelling standpoint? And she does it. I can't remember, Kendra, somebody that wrote that, but it's a very good book, and it's a very simple kind of way to like articulate change. And I think it really is kind of effective to kind of what you're talking about.
Oh, for sure. I think that's great. And like how you then prepare your materials, which is the organization part, which a lot of people are like, okay, I just need a deck and I need someone to send it to, right? You actually want to develop the story that is irresistible and unforgettable and makes you want more. In your teaser deck, building out a bunch of edge cases and details in your longer deck, your presentation deck, and then of course having all these elements in your data room before you go out to market, which allows you to be really prepared for someone to say, hey, I'd love to see more, like send me your data room, and for you to just be able to like invite them right away. So those are like 3 things that anyone can do and take control of and do well. And there are details in terms of how to do that. The next part, outreach, actually is counterintuitive for a lot of people, because what they've heard is I need to meet 200 investors and I have to take a lot of shots on goal, and I just need like this one person or these 2 or 3 people to say yes, and I don't know who they are, but I'm going to like find them needle in a haystack style. And because that produces a lot of frenzy and a lot of activity, it feels like it might be working until it doesn't. And what the outreach approach suggests is, much like you would not build a sales pipeline that way, you would go out to investors with whom there is extreme thesis product or thesis business fit. So they are looking for you. They just haven't met you yet. And you want to do a lot of homework, and you want to use warm introductions, and you want to build a movement and a message around what you're doing in a way that brings you together and close to those individuals. And then when you have a meeting with them, like set the terms of that meeting not in a either adversarial or differential way where they ask you a bunch of questions, you do your best not to crack under pressure, and then walk out of the room and wonder, will we will we get the money? Instead, it's to have a conversation in terms of like, how do you like to work? How do you support companies? What's your process like? And what else have you seen in companies in our space and things like that? And to, of course, filter their feedback, but more importantly, to like establish like what you want the relation to be. And that's super important, because as you go into like the next stage where you are running you've been running a process where fundraising can take up a lot of your time. So just like time box it to 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the type of momentum and interest you have, to say, I'm taking initial meetings like this time, I'm in town here, I'm doing this then. We're eager to find a lead and move forward through to the next steps, and be able to like close in a way at the end, which sounds kind of obvious, but is seldomly done, is to aggressively project manage the closing of your round. Because while you think these are professional investors, their job is to send me money, they need you to herd them like cats, sometimes at the end, because neither they nor your lawyer or anyone else is going to do it, and for you as a CEO to own that at the end is extremely important. So that's kind of like how we go from storytelling to organization to outreach to closing through these different steps of the framework.
That's pretty interesting, Vijay, and I think it's it's a good framework to do it. I think Maybe relationship is probably the biggest part I take away from that. Like, my world is probably different than yours, right? There's less startups, there's less VCs in my world. And so it is a lot more relationship based, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
so, you basically are telling the story 3 to 6 months before you even need their money or you want to engage with them. But you're basically building rapport, you're showing them a track record, you're giving them execution, you're answering some questions so that when you do need the money, like it's a warm introduction and you can move in. And so we don't have, I think, probably similar problems. I mean, the structure is exactly
Yeah.
the same.
hmm
I think the timing and the steps and maybe some of the urgency is different.
I think relationship building is very important, and
Yeah.
fundraising is about securing capital and forming a partnership with someone who aligns to your vision.
Yeah.
Um, while you're trying to run a process, you're hopefully connecting with people, and they kind of know of you, but you, of course, tell them, "I'm not raising right now," with the um, understanding that they need to see your progress over time, so they invest
Yeah.
in lines, not dots, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then when you're saying like, oh yeah, now we're getting ready to fundraise, um, they get to conviction around the same time that you get to um, wrap up your fundraising round, and then go back to company building for the next 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Maybe tell me, what do you think the top 2 or 3 problems or mistakes that entrepreneurs make repeatedly in this process?
I think the first mistake is assuming that this is just a matter of like, who do I need to know? I mean, and can you introduce me to? Who can you introduce me to? I think it's really a question of like, who is my story meant for?
Hmm.
Like, what is our story, and where does that fit? Again, it's very counterintuitive, and a lot of the first things that people will say is like, "Hey, who can you introduce me to?" Again,
But
not starting with like, who are we for, and how does that matter?
to me, it's very similar
Yeah,
to sales, right? Like when
yeah,
you think about early prospects, you do all this work to find the right persona. It's the
yeah.
same thing in the VC world.
Oh, sure, totally. Yeah, there are so many investors out there. There are so many different angels. There's lots of people. You don't want to take a sort of shotgun approach to it.
Approach. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, Anything else that you feel like that are kind of key mistakes that people
Yes.
make?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I think like so. In addition to what we're just talking about, I think there's a belief that um, there's a belief that if I just keep at it for a long time and keep that I'm raising money, like it will work, as a put where investors want to make the best possible decision at the last possible minute,
Moment.
right?
They
And
do.
preserve all this optionality to invest.
Yep.
The more you just like leave the door open to them, they feel they have a call option on your
Yep.
company if they're interested at all. And I think that is like problematic in terms of like to say like when you are not raising and to not like let them just kind of like leave you, sort of flailing. I think that is like one like structural mistake. And then a third one that I would add is not understanding when you've received a soft no.
Mm, it's a good one.
Because there's like lots of times people will say, oh yeah, come back to us here, like talk to us then, like
Yeah.
maybe this would make more sense if we did this. There's a lot of like soft no's, and I described some of them in the book that
Okay. Good.
are important for people to know.
Yeah, that's good. I think those are super important, and we see those all the time. So I think those are really good. Maybe talk a little bit about kind of just the role of AI. Like almost every podcast, you're getting different, kind
Mhm.
of perspectives on this. I think the startup universe has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. I'm curious on your perspective on this and how it's either changing the landscape or how people need to be thinking about this from a startup standpoint. We have some opinions, but I'm curious about like just your experience and kind of what you recommend.
Yeah, I think what AI has done is collapse the cost of cognition, the cost of like building and doing stuff, in the same way that 30 years ago the web started reducing the cost of distribution.
Yep.
So I think this is like a twice in a lifetime perhaps type of like thing where the world is changing very quickly. So what does that mean if you're building a startup? There are four big things to building a startup right now, at least a software company, and that is there's data, design, development, and distribution. So those 4 Ds. What AI is doing is allowing you to prototype, of course, to buy code, to do all kinds of things, to also have people do things much more quickly and with far greater number of iterations. And so that's changing dramatically what it means to have the power capacity to design and develop software. So that's super cool. But what that means is the points of differentiation are whoever has different data for training models or for creating new products, or whoever has structural advantages when it comes to distribution. So I see those two things as becoming even more important in the future than they were in the past.
I think one area too that I think people kind of sleep on, and it's not very sexy, but it's like using AI to basically just scale your organization internally, right? Where it's like whether it's N8N or LangChain or whatever you want to use, there are so many mundane, repeatable types of things that we spend time on. And the more you can automate that out of the gate, it provides time to go on to higher value stuff, right? Yeah. And so I just, and I think this is it's a great time to take on incumbents because, I look at the old company that I was at with SAP and Concur, like they got this huge monolithic database or, code base that they're working on. They're trying to insert AI components to it. But it's difficult. They have data, they have all sorts of assets to do it. But if you wanted to rethink travel or expense or whatever it happened to be, you probably could do it in a very different way with the tools that we have currently today. And so I think it's a unique thing. So I think I'm saying probably two things. One of them is building infrastructure and thinking about that first, even as you build a startup to create scale. And the second piece to it is there a new kind of dimension to product management that leverages these things, not from kind of a linear workflow process like we normally do in SaaS, but like basically an individual first, like personalization. There's a lot of aspects of this that I think that we can do to take on incumbents that puts startups in great positions.
Yeah. I think a few years ago when people started like using Slack at the beginning, people just were blown away. Wait, this is this business software that actually was like designed to be good for people, as opposed to what they were used to, which is software from big ERPs, like you alluded to, which and you could say the same thing about medical. Electronic records systems and things like that, right? Designed to be like as least user-friendly as possible, it seemed. And I think our ability to build things that people love to use, that makes their life better. And you don't need to have a really complicated way of just figuring out what that is. My favorite one is to like ask people, what's something you do that is in between two systems. Like if there's something where you download it in CSV and then you format it in Excel and then you show it to someone else, and then when they're okay with it, you upload it. Like that is the first workflow that someone who is a startup should like think about attacking as an insurgent. So within that like world, like you've got to be very customer centric. You've got to be building for humans. You've got to build stuff that people are delighted and relieved and can't imagine going back to the old way of working.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess one of the things that'll be interested too is, and maybe your opinion on this is just personalization, right? Like I had somebody on the podcast a while ago. He was diagnosed with ADHD, and so he built a pretty big profile in just a Google Doc. And basically, he uploaded it to ChatGPT as almost a system prompt, and basically said, every time you interface with me, this is what I really need. And his productivity, like, it's just different, right? Like he had an experience where it was chunked out, there was more visuals, there was a lot of things that basically was kind of geared towards him. And he would say, hey, look, if I logged out into the exact same prompt when I'm not logged in, it's a very, very different experience. And to me, there's an element of this that's saying, what experience can we create for the end user that's different for Vijay than it is Todd, even though it's the same application? We have this opportunity, and certainly Google and Amazon and Facebook do this today in a kind of a walled garden that's specific to whatever their monetization goals are. But like, is this an opportunity where the tools and the technology are now available for startups and entrepreneurs to try to leverage this and create a different experience?
Yeah, I think we're already like seeing it. Like one of the criticisms, right now of ChatGPT and some other LLMs is that they're trying to please us all the time. And it's interesting what you get when you say, like, can you be a little less, like nice or something like that, like,
agreeable.
Yeah, agreeable, right?
Yeah.
So, one of my concerns about personalization is, are we just going to get more of what we already like, which is, various algorithms showing you more videos or more music based on what you just saw, which just means it gets bland and all, and there's sameness, right? Or is it just like trying to flatter you, with things that you like to hear? Because what these products have figured out is, we like to be told we're great. We are extremely susceptible to consistency and recency bias, and that's what I hope personalization doesn't create, is just a bunch of things that are tuned in to human biases before we can even see them.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. What do you think about some of the open source? I guess we talk a lot about kind of open source versus the commercial products that they have. We really kind of stress with entrepreneurs in a lot of cases. Maybe you start with a commercial LLM, from an API perspective, and then basically as you get it working properly, you can look at some of the open source models to really optimize for maybe a smaller footprint and certainly a lower cost structure. It's amazing, Kimi and K2 and some of the stuff that's coming out. I mean, their quality is pretty good. Their cost structure is way different. Do you think that over time we just end up seeing smaller LLMs, with inference databases that have a lot of the specific domain knowledge and using the LLM as a decision-making tool, and basically a lot of this is just it's a toolkit that just seems amazing if we can leverage it the way we think. There's so many possibilities today.
Yeah, you're right. There are so many possibilities, and depending on what your roadmap and your customers' needs are, you may want to move to that open source sooner or later. I don't know if there's any prescribed time to do it. Whether or not things are going to get really specific and specialized is hard to say. When I talk to the CTO of the venture builder I'm involved with, GAI Ventures, it's like we realize the LLMs are all great. They're capable of asking all these questions. I feel like at the application level, the things we ask for, certainly prompting, but other ways in which we're interacting with those LLMs is the area that we can most improve. So I think over time you might get specialized LLMs, but our ability to communicate, or our ability to get our agents in the future to communicate really well, is what's going to help us to get the most value, even if we're building products that talk to LLMs on our behalf.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's a like you said, it's you're probably in a similar age as I am, and you think back to the computers that we first worked on, to getting on the internet, to the mobile, and now this. I mean, it just like in a 50-year span, it's been an amazing amount of technology change, and
Yeah.
I feel fortunate to participate in almost all of it, which is fun. I mean, it's a fun opportunity. So maybe kind of pivoting a little bit to, you've seen a lot of startups from a bunch of different perspectives. What do you think about like just resiliency? Like how do organizations build resiliency into I got to be around. I got to, like the margin of error. Like so many of them are like trying to manage cash flow to, and get enough customers to keep going. Like, do you have any lessons learned from your time working with startups that really are maybe some top 2 or 3 things from a resiliency standpoint?
Yeah, I think back particularly during the pandemic where people had to make decisions that were very difficult, that the folks that had the most like candid like conversation about like how bad things are, but here's the steps we're going to do to get better. And folks that decided, hey, I think we need to go into cockroach mode. I think we need to just not die. Right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that is one version of resilience, right? Is to
Yep.
just not die.
Yeah, yeah.
It may be that doing that comes at the cost of whatever like mission purpose, like things that people signed up for. And if that's what is not satisfying and wrong, like maybe it's okay to say, we don't or won't continue. But I think the thing about resilience is it is usually in the case of startups tied to like, can we continue until we magically like stumble on product market fit, or can we do something right now that accelerates our rate of learning? Is there, what's slowing us down, and what if I waved a magic wand would be different? And the sort of the sort of first response that people give is usually, oh, if I just had more, if I had more money, if I had another 6 months runway or 1 year runway, or if I just like, if we had people doing this, or if, like we just had like 3 more customers, right? Like they start with like this, this thing of like, oh, if we just had more, right? But I don't think like that is usually a problem. There's usually a few layers deep where they realize, oh, actually, we're not shipping this product.
Yeah.
And the reason we're not shipping this product is because so-and-so is like part-time and they haven't come on full-time, right? And, or the real reason we're not like, closing customers or that they're churning is because they're really concerned about security, and we are just not like enterprise grade. So
Yep.
if you go a layer deeper and 2 layers deeper, you start realizing this is the thing that's in our way. Now let's just pick one of those things to the exclusion of everything else, and let's just like attack that. So resilience is more about your ability to keep doing the next thing, in as much as it is like just this willpower to not die.
Yeah, and I maybe even sharpen that a little bit. Like, I think sometimes it's the prioritization of it, right? Like, I think a lot of times in startups, like, I got 50 number 1 priorities. Well, you really don't. Really, you have 1. That's the only way. That's a definition of a number 1 priority.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes they struggle to basically figure out what the number 1 priority is to really focus on.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting? If you look at the history of the word priority, there was no plural for priority until about the 1970s. We just like it got made up.
That's good.
It got made up in a political debate.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's like, oh well, we have a lot of priorities. Whereas like the root of the word priority is prior. So there's only one thing that can come prior to everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, I mean, I think that's the mentality. We should get rid of priorities and get back to priority. And so I'm with you. So maybe like kind of closing this out, I'm curious on, you're an executive coach. You spend a lot of time with startups. Maybe talk to me a little bit about your practice when people get involved, like what types of services you provide to them. I know lots of people that want mentorship. They want somebody to walk alongside them. But I think sometimes they're confused about what they really want.
Yeah. There are many ways to have a sounding board, to have a community, a coach, peers, a mentor, and they're all very different. Sometimes people want very specific advice, which is they're looking for an answer, and that's not necessarily what coaching is. Sometimes people are looking for a mentor, someone who they can look up to and will say, well, I walked in your shoes 5, 10 years ago, whatever it was, and here's what I would suggest. I think at the various earliest stages, people need sometimes mentors and advisors in their lives. A coach is someone who is not a consultant. They're not going to like hand you a deliverable, and they're not a mentor either, because they don't want you to be like them. A coach is walking alongside you, and we do the work together. And in fact, you, Todd, are ideally the deliverable, a better you, in fact, the best version of you. And that's really important in the early stages of a company. Many coaches work with founders at different stages. I find that this kind of not beginning, but the early stage, that enablement to chief executive jump is really important. And that's where I come in, because I'm helping them be the best version of themselves, like work within their genius, bring out the genius of others. And then this shows up in various coachable moments, which are frequently fundraising, GTM, and people and team building. And so I really want people to be juggling with joy, not running around with their hair on fire. And if we create great rhythm in how you're working and you're showing up and running your business, then everything else gets better for you and for everyone in your business.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate it. I think that's a good place to leave it. And maybe the last piece is, if they want to learn more or want to work with you, is there a good way to, connect?
Yeah, of course. Certainly, the funding framework. That's upside down. The funding framework is available wherever good books are sold online. I also have a Substack, which is Startup System. That's at substack.com. And then people can certainly find me on LinkedIn and at my website, mystartupsystem.com.
Okay. Well, Vijay, thank you very much for taking the time and kind of sharing your expertise. I think this has been a great conversation.
Likewise, Todd. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Startup Stories from the Treehouse. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And if you found our conversation helpful, leave a review. It really helps other founders discover our show. For more insight and episode summaries, don't forget to subscribe to the Wildfire Labs Substack. We appreciate your support and can't wait to share more stories with you next time.